This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. It's Women's History Month, and 2 women of color are making history with the public swearing-in ceremony for a cabinet member. This morning, Deb Haaland dressed and carefully wrapped her Pueblo moccasins before joining Vice President Kamala Harris, who issued the oath of office for the new Secretary of the Department of Interior.
I, Deborah Haaland,
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
the
Constitution of the United
the
States
Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Madam Secretary. Congratulations. History is being made yet again.
Thank you.
Here we are. Let's take a picture.
As the Vice President noted, history is indeed being made. Haaland is the first American Indian to head any cabinet agency. Haaland's private swearing-in took place on Tuesday evening, shortly after her confirmation. She went to work immediately, so this is her second day on the job. Wednesday marked the 1-year anniversary of the first confirmed case of the coronavirus on the Navajo Nation. To mark the somber day, the nation had a virtual Navajo Nation Day of Prayer to honor and remember all the lives lost to COVID-19. As of Tuesday, there are more than 29,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 1,219 reported deaths on the Navajo Nation. As tribes make progress in vaccinating tribal citizens, many are now able to offer the vaccine to non-natives. So now, any resident of Oklahoma can get the COVID-19 vaccine. Last week, the Chickasaw Nation opened COVID-19 vaccine appointments to all Oklahomans, whether or not they're part of the tribe. Other tribes in Oklahoma have also expanded vaccinations beyond tribal citizens. Osage, Choctaw, and Citizen Potawatomi nations are offering vaccines to all members of the public, while the Cherokee Nation has opened up appointments to anyone living within its 14-county jurisdiction. Oklahoma is currently in phase 3 of its vaccine distribution plan. The issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls turned into a heated exchange between a First Nations lawmaker and the Speaker of the House. Nahanni Fontaine is a member of the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba for St. John's constituency in the province. She was asked to leave the legislative chamber for a day after using what was described as unparliamentary language. During the session, Fontaine, who's an Anishinaabe, spoke about the recent homicide of a First Nations woman by the name of Jana Williams. Fontaine attended a memorial gathering for Williams, and during the session, she discussed the lack of support for the family from other members of the Manitoba legislature.
Madam Speaker, I'm simply pointing out that not one single member of the PC caucus has reached out to the family or has even posted on Twitter, which they are so apt to do when it's Orange Shirt Day, condolences to the family. It is indicative that they just don't give a crap about Indigenous women and girls in this province.
Order.
After Fontaine's comments, the leaders asked her to retract the statement 3 times, and Fontaine declined. After her refusal, the House Speaker, Myrna Dreiger, had Fontaine removed from the chamber on the grounds that she had disregarded the authority of the chair.
And the Premier was answering it in a very condescending, dismissive, bullying manner as usual. And so the clip that people see is me just getting, just upset. And because we've seen no action, and there's consequences to that. There's consequences to no action in the lives of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited.
Fontaine told Indian Country Today Her comments had also been fueled by previous interactions with the Minister of Justice. She says when she was discussing Indigenous and marginalized people, the Minister of Justice yelled from the other side of the room, "Oh, you'd know all about gangs." And those are the headlines from Indian Country today. We'll be right back. A year ago, our team at Indian Country Today had just 8 journalists on board. Then the pandemic hit, the coronavirus. We all immediately jumped into action and began reporting on the impact and what it was starting to show in Indian Country. We knew we had to look at the numbers and how health information was being carried. We had to take a look at how large industries were shutting down and how quickly that would include tribal enterprises such as casinos. Joining us today to talk about those first few days is Jourdan Bennette-Begaye, our managing editor. Welcome, Jourdan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Patty Talahongva, our executive producer. Welcome, Patty.
Thanks, Mark.
So, Jourdan, when this first started, it was really small. We didn't think, there was concern that it would grow, but we had no idea of the magnitude.
Yep, that is right. I remember around the beginning of March was when the first case hit Umatilla, and then all of a sudden we were, scanning across Indian Country, seeing what tribes had any cases. And Navajo was the one where I think took my attention because it's home, it's large. People are very community oriented. They're always having community events, and I think that was the moment when at least it hit for me, because you had one case and it just all of a sudden within, I think, 5 days, it kind of went from one case to approximately 20 something cases. And my family's home. And so I knew this is, something bigger, and it was something very unexpected for all of us.
Well, and when we started, we were doing updates constantly, and it was interesting because we failed to grasp almost immediately that this was going to be a long haul story and we couldn't run at 100,000 miles an hour through the thing.
Yeah, that's right. I remember, Katie Oyen coming in, and she was reminding us this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I had to really consider that, because especially with the COVID database, that we started, and actually we started that a year ago today, when I was looking back at the spreadsheet, and I had to really consider, all right, we got to keep some steam for this and really scan and, look at, everything from a big picture standpoint rather than zeroing in on different communities, which is definitely, part of the story. But what was missing a year ago was, what does this mean for Indian Country? And I think that's where we, as a team, our coverage became very important.
Well, and I want to come back to the database, but first I want to bring in Patty. Patty, a year ago, in the middle of figuring out what this all was, you took off in the car and started driving to places where it was, which when you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Tell us about that experience.
Well, and that's the role of journalists, right? You go to the danger and you report on what's happening. And I just remember this time last year, in the days leading up to St. Patrick's Day, and watching all of these industries shut down. We saw the Final Four shut down, and then we heard the cruise ship industry was shutting down. And then I think my moment of like, OMG, was when Disneyland announced it was closing. And so immediately I thought, okay, that's a huge area where people gather and have fun. It's a big entertainment area. So what does that mean for tribal casinos? And so I started working on the story about tribal casinos that were still operating. And I called several of them, checked to see what they were doing. And in those early days, all they were doing was putting out hand sanitizer and wiping down the machines. But there was no social distancing. There was not until much later did they start putting like only one entrance in and one entrance out and that type of thing. So, we worked on that story together, as a matter of fact. And when you posted that story, then like 30 minutes later, we got word that Buffalo Thunder in Santa Fe, New Mexico, was announced it was closing on Monday morning. So yes, then I was like, I have to be there. So I jumped in the car and drove from Phoenix up to Santa Fe, and then looked at stops along the way where we saw just life going on as normal. And that, I think, really drove the point home for us that Indian country needs to be prepared. We need to let our people know what's happening. And as journalists, we're looking at news from around the world. And so we could see what was happening in Italy and how bad it was there. And that really drove, I think, for me personally, that motivation to get the word out and to let people know what was coming down with this virus. And at that point, it had not been declared a global pandemic, but that was coming very soon too. So yes, I know when I got up to Santa Fe and interviewed Governor Talachi there, and we're there at 4 a.m. when the casino closed. And I went back and I uploaded my files and I called Jourdan in DC and I said, here are my files. It was a total team effort, right, Jourdan? She edited the package. It was nuts.
And we didn't have a broadcast at that point.
No, we didn't. That was weeks away, but absolutely. I think, getting those images, and I have to thank my sister, Bernadine, for helping me out, because she offered to help drive me. And I told her, look, if you come with me, when you come home, you have to quarantine because we don't know what we're being exposed to. And people are they get very excited about this kind of news. And so, we were threatened with, oh, we're going to call the police on you, but I'm on a public sidewalk and I'm taking pictures of the Gallup India Medical Center. And so, they didn't know, or they didn't understand that, I'm on a public sidewalk, I can take photos, but just, their approach and how they were trying to figure out, like all of the medical community, how to handle patient care and yet stay apart. And so I remember seeing, and we took photos of the medication for diabetics, and it was outside, and people had to come in their, park in the parking lot, go to this table outside, and it was cold in Gallup, and wait there until the medical people went inside to get their prescriptions and then bring it outside. And I just remember seeing, elders walking up there and thinking, gosh, there's got to be a better way. And eventually they made, drive-through medication pickup and, things like that would help the people and not have them standing outside in the cold. And then looking at boarding schools that were closing down and the students were being sent home, and all the fiasco that came along with that, because it was just, everything was so sudden. In the city, when you shut down a school, it's pretty, it's hard, but at the same time, you're not having to figure out transportation for those kids to get home and coordinating all of that, which happened with a lot of the native boarding schools.
One of the huge challenges for this story, Jourdan, was trying to, and shows the weakness of our data system and being able to collect good information about what's going on. Talk about how you set out to collect information and what's happened to that.
Yeah, sure. So that spreadsheet was actually just started out of curiosity because, over the past, I think first 2 weeks of March is when we started seeing cases just pop up around Indian country. And I remember, in our Slack channel, people were sharing social posts, and I thought at that time too, Indian Health Service wasn't giving daily updates. So I thought, oh, this would be really neat to track just for us. And then I remember you sharing a point about how transparency in that data is needed to be shared with the public. And that really hit home for me. And so I thought, you're right, we'll share it. We put it out there to the world, and it kind of just took on its own life and, grew legs and kind of just, it grew something bigger than I thought it would, because pretty soon, we started getting cases and emails from public health information officers, from tribes, medical directors or nurse practitioners started calling or emailing us. And soon enough, that data started coming to us rather than us going to them, which is very much, the case that we wanted to happen, because Indian country is so huge. It's going to take a lot of time and, manpower to reach out to every tribe. And I think with that data, I really got a sense of what the Indian health system looks like and how we all there needs to be, one system one data system or one surveillance system, because it's still to this day not on that. You know, same thing with the tribal epicenters. I know they're working really hard and trying to do their job, but there's also a lack of resources on their end. And so it's just seeing the flaws in all of these different areas. And now, you know, that spreadsheet that we're talking about, Johns Hopkins wanted to do something similar. So we actually, Indian Country Today, partnered with them. So they took that on and are now, you know, we got volunteers, you know, collecting and going out to tribes and calling tribal leaders and talking about this project. We have the Johns Hopkins website now has like a COVID map where you overlay the counties and the tribal lands. And when you hover over it, you have the county cases coming up. But now we're trying to get that to a point where if you hover over tribal lands or, you know, look up a certain tribe, the cases come up. And what's really interesting about that is it's a little bit difficult because there's no standard in how to report the data for cases or vaccinations. And also we're seeing that a lot of tribes share this information through social posts, and to get that data scraped automatically from public websites, it's a little bit hard to do from social media, because tribes, it's just like, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but tribes aren't putting it in like one standard spot for their community.
Well, and some tribes have decided they did not want information released, and that has also complicated that story.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And I think tribal sovereignty has definitely been, you know, one of the power moves that we use in, you know, checkpoints and shutting out communities, but it also has, you know, it's like also the chink in our armor as well, too, is what we're finding out in this pandemic.
I want to ask you both, one theme that we saw a lot of in our reporting was how many tribes were far more aggressive in their management of the pandemic than state governments and other local governments. How did that come about, and where did you see it? Let's start with you, Patty.
One chairperson I interviewed was Brian Newland from the Bay Mills Indian community, and he talked about how they were also looking at Europe and other parts of the world, China, where this virus had really stopped their whole economy, their whole communities. So they really took a proactive approach. And one of the things they did was they put their entire community on a 3-month lockdown immediately. And many tribes were doing a 1-month lockdown, you know, stay at home orders, that type of thing. But he just said, we're going to send a strong message, 3 months, stay home. And then they looked at everyone in their community, and that included inmates. And I thought that was the most compassionate approach, and the only one that I'd heard of where, you know, they went to the county, which they have a partnership with the county, where the people may be tried in tribal court, but they're held at the county jail. And they went there and said, we want to bring all of our people home. They will be home on house arrest. They will finish out their sentencing, but we want them home and safe, because they also knew that there were outbreaks in places like jails and also, you know, assisted living homes and that type of thing. So he really thought, you know, their tribal council really thought about how to bring everyone home and be safe and hunker down and ride out the pandemic. And so they had huge success. And I really thought that was, you know, when you say 3 months, stay home, as opposed to 1 month, you know, 2 weeks, 1 month, you know, right now, Hopi, my tribe, didn't start with any kind of stay-at-home orders. And now we're seeing stay-at-home orders for the weekend. So that's one example. Another example is when the vaccine finally came out, we reported on tribes who did not follow CDC guidelines. Instead, they used their tribal sovereignty and said, we're going to vaccinate our fluent speakers first, because they want to keep that culture and those knowledge bearers safe. And so no matter what age you are, if you speak your language fluently, then you got the vaccine. And I thought that was a tremendous show of tribal sovereignty.
Jourdan.
Yeah, and I mean, Patty hit on the points that, you know, I think made a huge difference. And I remember going back to the conversation with Dean a year ago when he said, our tribe's ready. He said very much, we're not ready. And even to this day, you know, we're still struggling to get it together, you know, considering all aspects. You know, and even, I mean, he just messaged me and saying like cases are still increasing across Indian country. And that's so surprising. So, I mean, going forward, I'm trying to think what can Indian country do better? Do we need to step up the health system? Do we need to invest more in the public health infrastructure as well? Because that's being done now, but it's also not enough.
Well, more stories to report. Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Mark.
And thank you, Jourdan.
Thanks, Mark.
And when we come back, we'll hear the latest on efforts of water protectors in their fight against pipelines. We'll be right back. Indian Country Today's Marionette Pember has been writing an extraordinary series on pipelines. And recently she had some drama. Welcome, Marionette.
Hi, Mark. Great to be here.
So tell us the story about first the series and then some of the particulars.
Yes, I've been writing about Enbridge's mainline system. They are putting in a new line, Line 3 in northern Minnesota, that will carry tar sands oil. It's a larger circumference line, and many people are opposed to that. Some people are in favor, but many Native people in particular are opposed because they're concerned about the impact of a potential spill on the land and the impact on wild rice and on the environment in general. So I was recently up in northern Minnesota near Grand Rapids, and where some of the water protectors were on site commemorating a spill that happened with, I don't know what the line was called at that time. It was back in 1990, 30 years ago, also owned by Enbridge. It was a different name at that time, but it was the largest inland pipeline spill ever, and I guess still to this day, and spilled in a little river that flows into the Mississippi, and that river is called the La Prairie River. So folks were on site to commemorate that, to sing, and to pray by the river there, and to call attention. So they had a rally, and walked over a train trestle to draw attention over highway, US Highway 2, which is quite the main highway here in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. And at some point made the decision to walk out onto the highway and stop traffic and to walk carrying signs and singing. And at that point, several jurisdictions of police, the Minnesota State Police, and also, some of the various county police obviously had been waiting nearby and descended very quickly on the people. We're talking about, I would say perhaps about 100 people, and announced that everyone was under arrest. So in fact, they didn't arrest everyone, which would have been a little bit cumbersome, I would think. However, they arrested 2 people, handcuffed them, and took them away. And the remaining people, most of them, they cited them for creating a public nuisance and basically stopping traffic on the thoroughfare, and had it obviously, created a whole process to cite people right there at this little wayside road. They actually utilized these, it was actually kind of clever. They utilized whiteboards and would put people's names and cited them, and then later apparently mailed them citations.
I want to ask you about one of the water protectors that you wrote about, Tanya. Tell her story.
And I came to Grand Rapids here in honor and the memory, or not the honor, but the memory of what happened here in Grand Rapids, which was the largest inland oil spill. And that's 1.7 million gallons of oil that spilled inland here in Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
Tanya Abid, she is from the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and she's been very involved with the water protectors here. She also was formerly involved with the opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline out at Standing Rock. And so she is also quite involved here in this region. She had told us that she lives nearby, and some people who are in favor of the pipeline, as a lot of people have jobs. It has brought a lot of jobs here. People shot holes in like a sign she had out in her front yard opposing Line 3. So her experience is very emblematic, I think, of the controversy that's going on here, and how it has really divided neighbors and community members, and even in some cases families.
What's next in your series, Marionette?
Well, that's interesting. I'm really quite looking forward to this. I'm wanting to take a look at how Enbridge and other fossil fuel companies do something, I guess we could call it damage control or getting their side of the story out. Called, it's sort of a strategy, corporate responsibility, social responsibility, and it's actually a thing. So they have on their website, one can go and see, they really do herald the various Native people that have worked for them and that do work for them, and also the economic contributions they make to the community. So I thought that would be quite interesting to take a look at if, how that actually plays out, these contributions, how we, what kind of measures there are. So that's my upcoming piece, and I'm quite looking forward to that.
Well, you think about the impact on a small tribe, and it's really extraordinary.
Yes, very much.
Thank you so much, Marinette Pember.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.